every update that comes out for Modern Warfare now, we can almost expect to see changes made to the game that aren't actually listed in the public patch notes for whatever reason that may be. Whether it be big or small, changes are often made without any notification to the community, so you may have seen something yourself in-game and wondered, wait, is that new or has that always been there? Today we're going to break down 15 secret changes that Infinity Ward didn't tell you about. So as we go along, let me know your thoughts. Firstly, did we miss anything that jumped out at you? And as well, what do you think of these changes? Good, bad, strange that they weren't listed? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know down below. But as well, if you are new to the channel, maybe considering that subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Modern Warfare and all things Warzone content on a daily basis. We'll keep you in the loop with absolutely everything you need to know. That said, let's get into it. The first thing we can talk about is kind of small, but it is literally the first thing you'll be met with whenever you end up trying to connect to online servers. You'll notice that there is now a new logo while connecting to those servers. They're really doubling down on the whole Warzone branding, which naturally makes sense, but if you haven't noticed now, it kind of seems like Warzone has taken that priority in terms of marketing. Everything is now branded as Call of Duty Warzone Modern Warfare, kind of like Modern Warfare's the subdivision or the spin-off now, which is interesting. Or perhaps it's something where they're just putting it front and center, but it's actually not Call of Duty Warzone Modern Warfare, kind of like that Walking Dead meme of "Don't Dead Open Inside" written on the doors of the pilot. But anyways, that's a minimal change that caught my attention just simply because of the shift in branding here at that. But the first thing we can talk about actually is probably the biggest, and it deals with Modern Warfare's MP as well as Warzone, this being the caliber conversions and ammo modifications for the Model 680. Now, we're not going to talk about this too much. We'll breeze through it if you guys missed it, but we did talk about this in yesterday's video, but it was never actually listed on the patch notes or anywhere in particular. So therefore, just to be thorough, we're putting this in the list of changes that weren't explicitly made. So on the Model 680, we actually got 4 new ammo types and modifications here with this. We saw the 12 gauge 6R mags, the Slug 6R mags, the Dragon's Breath rounds, and the Dragon's Breath 6R mags. Now, each of these have their own separate abilities that they increase ADS speed. Some come with a detachable magazine, those being the magazine denoted attachments. The Dragon Breath rounds are just simply incendiary shells. They're not actually a magazine modification, but you can unlock these by getting 10 kills while prone and defending an objective for the 12 gauge 6R mags, by getting 5 kills in 5 different matches while aiming down sights and removing any stock attachment for the Slug 6R mags, by also getting 15 kills shortly after reloading for the standard Dragon's Breath rounds, and then also by getting 3 long shot kills in 3 different matches while using the Scout optics for the Dragon's Breath 6R mags. Like we talked about in yesterday's video, these don't have to be done in any special sequential order, like what we had with the Uzi, where you had to complete the ammo modification before you could unlock the barrel modification, but these can be done at any point and are brand new for you to play around with. Let's jump over to some Warzone specific changes before we come back to standard MP and the rest of the technical changes made on the back end. Let's talk about firstly the fact that in Plunder, there's now a kill counter. This wasn't there beforehand, and realistically, I never truly noticed it without, but now seeing it there, it makes so much more sense to have it there. And now that it is there, I do second guess myself why I didn't think it was weird that it wasn't there in the first place. But that's something that will be there the entire Plunder game. You can now count your kills, track all that kind of stuff, and it's just more in line with the UI and what we see for the HUD of Warzone overall, not just Battle Royale now. In both Plunder as well as Battle Royale, there's a new sort of backlight, if you want to call it that, a blue gradient behind the spare armor plates that you have on your HUD to be able to quickly denote how many you have right there. I think that it was pretty apparent that you could see those relatively quickly, but now this sort of color gauge now will give you a little bit more of a snap effect. If you want to quickly glance over, you can see exactly where you're going to just by that difference in color. But that was an adjustment made to the HUD as well. Another one includes a change in the notification for the Gulag closing and Battle Royale. This will now pop up and almost look as sort of a biohazard sort of notification with the same sort of ribbon as that of the nuke being called in MP, but instead in yellow rather than red. So again, another thing that would just allow you to quickly snap to that notification when looking on your screen when you may be looking around the map as well. From a technical standpoint, and now bridging the gap between Warzone to the rest of the game, we ended up seeing a new setting added in on the back end without any notification, that being something that deals with a parachute auto deploy. So when you have this enabled, you'll be able to drop directly in and then it will pull right before you're about to hit the ground, a little bit higher than that of the limit before you just go splat on the ground, because you can can pull it really close if you don't have this enabled, but this now applies in not only Warzone, but also in co-op as well as in ground war. So this will help you out in a couple of situations, though if you do cut the shoot, I'm pretty sure that it still kind of negates it, where you only have the one initial pull, and then after that, it's up to the user. So if you go splat afterwards, that's user error and not on the game side. But now jumping over into the rest of the game, that's also not the only setting that was added in on the back end without any notification. On PC, there's now a specific setting which will allow you to adjust your aim assist based upon whatever FOV you have. This dealing with the scaling of how your character will look and the aim assist that you will end up getting if you're playing with a controller on PC. Now, if I'm understanding this properly, this basically means the wider the FOV, the smaller the aim assist bubble that you'll have in game when using a controller on PC. So it's probably best to leave it as disabled so that it doesn't scale with that and you still have just the standard aim assist, but it's an option that if you want to play around with it, you can. Next, if you jump into ground war or any match on Ania Palace, you may notice that there's a slight change here with this map in particular. The minimap was actually changed so that it's now zoomed in a little bit more than where it was previously. This one in particular, I'm not sure if it's a bug or if it's something that was intentionally done, but this has happened a couple of times on a various number of maps, and I think actually Ania the most, though, where it's happened before. We've had updates either zoom in on the minimap or zoom out of the minimap, and it messes with the scaling and how players may actually be able to perceive the information that's at hand. So that's something that I don't know if it will stick, but it's an interesting change no less. Next, the portion of the user interface was adjusted here. When we take a look at the combat record now, this actually was resorted in how you can look at the weapons in their listing in that combat record. Now it's all alphabetical, so you'll see your start with your weapons like your 357, your 50 GS, all the way down to your VLK Rogue and your X16. So off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly if there was any sort of discernible pattern to the sorting beforehand. I always thought it was arbitrary just because I felt like weapons didn't really match up. It might have been that they were sorted by weapon classification, but I actually don't think that's the case thinking back on it now. But I could be wrong, but it's now a little more sorted in your user interface now if you want to check out your combat record. Next, for user interface design a little bit further, the green new squares that will pop up in your creator class, that's something that is incredibly annoying at times, but these are now a little bit changed to which they now showcase on whatever classification in your actual creator class it's in. It will now showcase if it's on, say, your primary, it'll let you know that there's an adjustment for that primary. If it's on your secondary, it will then show up on that secondary bar. So it's just a little bit more precise. If you're like me and feel the need to clear out every single one, it's still going to be a bother, but it at least lets you know a little bit easier what part you need to clear out. One awesome part, though, after that I think is great is the fact that now the quick play selection, you can of course filter between your core, hardcore, or your CDL playlists. Beforehand, if you ended up doing this, you sorted out, you wanted to default to, say, hardcore. If you did this and then closed your application, shut off for the night, then got back on the next day, you'd have to re-default it to hardcore. This actually has now been changed to which it saves to your profile now so that you have the ability to stay defaulted to core, hardcore, or CDL playlists, whatever one you want to play around with, even if you do close the application. I've tested this out a bunch here this morning. It's worked out for me, where every time I close the application, reboot it back up, it'll still be defaulted to hardcore. So that's a nice little feature that may not be something you really ever think about, but is just a nice thing to have. Outside of that, we'll talk a little bit about some weapon details here. The Odin in particular had a little bit of an adjustment here to it, to which the canvas for the weapon camos you put on the Odin actually got a little bit of an adjustment. Beforehand, it did not extend the monolithic suppressor, but now if you have the monolithic suppressor equipped with the Odin, it will then showcase whatever camo you have on that suppressor, which is cool. And recently we saw some adjustments to other weapons as well, one of those being the Scar, in which that actually got a complete redesign of the canvas on the weapon. Beforehand on the Scar, it was kind of a war-torn effect where it was a gritty and sort of sanded out version of the camo, but instead it was just reapplied to be a solid camo, which made it, I think, look a lot better. The other weapon adjustment was that the FAL monolithic suppressor had a slight design change to it, which is interesting that they changed the design of that, but that's what was done here with that. And the final two changes we'll talk about are ones that happened after the update, so they weren't necessarily listed in those patch notes, but also one has since been changed out. It was a bug that was inadvertently put in. Firstly, let's talk about that bug, which has since been corrected. This being the PKM had an audio change where it had, one, no reload audio, and two, the same gunfire as the M4, which was kind of weird to see. But to my knowledge, that's been fixed out. I jumped into a game of my own in private match to see this, and it seemed like it was all back up to normal. But the other thing added in that's going on currently still right now is a brand new playlist called Cabin Fever. Warfare. It was added after the update yesterday, but it's a playlist with the maps on rotation of Rust, Shipment, Hackney Yard, Gunrunner, and Shoot House, with a varying number of modes of TDM, Domination, Hardcore, Kill Confirmed, and Hardpoint, all within that. So kind of the fan favorites in terms of maps mixed with a bunch of different modes. So maybe something you want to play around with because maybe you really enjoy it. It did get an update earlier today that made the rotations of the map a little bit more even, so you should get all of these now relatively close to evenly distributed. But that's going to round out the changes and wrap up this video. So that said, let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. Any of these changes really stand out to you? Anything that I may have missed? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know. But that said, hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare and Warzone content, updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff we got you covered here on the channel. So if any of that interests you, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, there's the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. If you guys want to strike a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.